And welcome everyone to another Smart Money Circle episode. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is John Cash, who's the CEO and chairman of the board for UR ticker symbol is URG. John, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to the Smart Money Circle.
Hey, it's good to be on the show. It's good to meet you and looking forward to the conversation today.
Likewise. So, John, I always like to begin. Can you tell us a little about your story and how you got to where you are today, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I grew up in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri, just a hillbilly. Went to the school at the University of Missouri-Rolla, which is now the Missouri School of Science and Technology. Was really fortunate and blessed to have that school so close to home. Got a degree in geology, followed up with a master's degree there in geology. Started off in the uranium space. A uranium miner, an explorer, have been my entire career. So for the last 30 or so years now, I've been doing uranium. A lot of geologists move from commodity to commodity, and for whatever reason, that just didn't happen with me. Worked for some of the majors, BHP, Cameco. Those listening will know that those are some of the big uranium names globally. But about going on 17 years now, got a call from UR Energy, and they said, "Hey, we're starting a company, starting a mine in Wyoming. Do you want to come over to Wyoming and be a part of that team?" And I've had an opportunity to do a lot of different things in the uranium space, but I had never built a mine. So I said, "Yeah, let's do it. That sounds really exciting. I want that on my resume, and I want that experience. Done a lot of production, done a lot of regulatory, but let's go build a mine." So my wife and I moved over, and we've been here for 17 years now in Wyoming, raised our family here. We love it here. Excited to be with UR Energy. And most recently, it's been just shy of 3 years ago now, took the role as CEO. And it's been at a great time because the market's been hot and we're ramping up production at our facilities. So yeah, that's Adam, that's kind of my story.
I love it, John. So I'm very bullish on the nuclear space. I'm very bullish on the uranium space. I have a lot of questions I want to ask you about that just from, wearing my interesting hat. But before I go there, I'd like to learn more about your company. Please let us know what you do, some of your competitive advantages, and anything that you want to share with respect to the story of
Sure.
UR.
Yeah, UR Energy formed as a private company in 2004 in Canada, but our assets are all in the US. We are what's called an in situ miner. In situ is a Latin term, it means in the place. So one of the really unique things about us is we mine using water wells. We don't dig down into the ore. We simply install pretty small diameter water wells, and we inject water, CO2, and oxygen into the ore body to recover the uranium. So essentially, it's a seltzer water that we inject into the ore body to recover it. But right now, we are mining at our Lost Creek project in Wyoming, south central Wyoming. We've been mining there for, well, since 2013. And we are now building out a second mine also in Wyoming called Shirley Basin. And we expect to have that up and running very late next year or very early 2026. So the company is in growth mode. We've got a number of really good long-term contracts with major U.S. utilities. We're under non-disclosure, so I can't say who that is. But if I said their names, all of the listeners would say, "Yeah, I know them. I buy electricity from them. They're the big guys."
Nice.
So that's where we are right now, just ramping up production, selling to those major utilities. We've kept a really simple story. We don't go out and acquire a bunch of properties. We typically only make acquisition if it's something we can put into production. We are very, very well cashed up right now. We have on the order of $120 million cash in the bank with no debt, and we're moving into revenue right now by selling into those contracts. So, man, the uranium space, the nuclear space right now is so hot, so much excitement around it. So it's a great time to be ramping production back up for the company.
I love it, John. So, okay, just to help the audience understand a little bit, please educate us a little bit on the uranium, how it works. I know with gold, we've had gold miners on before, and let's say, gold selling in the market for 2,500 bucks an ounce. Okay, great. It cost them 1,000 bucks an ounce. You can see the profit margins there. How does it work with uranium?
Yeah. So typically the fuel chain, there are several parts of the process. We are at the very beginning. We mine the uranium out of the ground. We then send it to a conversion facility. They do a chemical conversion on it. Then it gets sent to an enrichment facility to change the isotopic ratios of U-238 to U-235. then they get sent to fuel fabrication, and then to the nuclear power plant. And there's some other little steps in between, but those are the major steps. So the way the market works is when we mine, we typically sell our pounds to a utility. That book transfer occurs at the conversion facility. So here in the United States, there is only one conversion facility. It's in Metropolis, Illinois. So we send our product by truck to Metropolis, Illinois, the home of Superman. And that's where the book transfer occurs. The utility takes over ownership, and they then shepherd it through the remainder of the fuel cycle for processing. But that's the common way. There are a lot of different ways it can be managed, but that's typically the way it works.
And then from a P&L standpoint, does uranium trade on privately as far as the costs and how you sell it? Does the price fluctuate like it would a gold, any other commodity, silver, oil, sugar, whatever it is? Or
Yeah.
how does
There really is no open market. All of the sales contracts are privately negotiated and signed. There's no requirement to disclose those prices and quantities to anyone. So it is a private market. There are some publications out there that publish a price, but they are really more of a survey of the market. They may not actually be based on an actual transaction. So if anyone wanted to invest in the uranium space, that is critical that they understand that the published price is more of a survey or an opinion of what the market is not representative of an actual market. But I would have to say that typically it's pretty close. There's usually not much delta between the sentiment that's published and the actual contracting.
I love it. And now let's talk about the actual nuclear space, just out of my own interests and my curiosity here. The nuclear industry in the US, we haven't really had a renaissance or an upgrade. A lot of these facilities are dated now in decades. Number one, why? And then two, what do you think about the space now and going forward?
Yeah. So for many years, the U.S. nuclear industry, power generation, we've had trouble competing with natural gas. And that's why there really has been no expansion. So, and there's been opposition to nuclear over the years because of concerns with radiologic safety. However, that is beginning to move away. First off, natural gas prices are much higher. Secondly, people are beginning to understand the real risk of nuclear power plants. It's probably the single safest form of energy out there. When you look at injuries or fatalities per terawatt power generated, nuclear is very, very safe. Even when you consider things that have happened in Russia or Japan, incredibly good safety record. And then probably the most important, what's really kind of started a renaissance globally with nuclear power is it's carbon free. So when the atoms are consumed, put in a reactor and the fission process occurs, there is no emission of CO2. So the world is looking for carbon-free sources of electricity. You can get that from wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, but they really need base load. Wind and solar are fantastic, but sometimes the wind doesn't blow and the sun does go down every night. So there are very important limitations on renewables. But hydro and nuclear really fill that gap beautifully because they're on 24/7, 365. You rarely have to shut them down. Highly, highly reliable. And a really important component that we're beginning to see take shape now is big data. Big data, the power consumption with AI and data centers is growing at an unimaginable pace. Unreal numbers from the Energy Information Administration here in the US and other agencies around the world about growth of consumption of energy. Within a few years, as much as 10% of the electricity generated in the US will go toward big data. That's mind-boggling.
Wow.
And those companies are looking for carbon-free power, but they need to keep those computers up running 24/7 so that when you and I do a Google search in the middle of the night, we can do that. And they've got the power to support that. So what we're seeing right now is big tech companies are moving toward nuclear power, and they're signing big contracts. Very recently, Microsoft signed an offtake agreement with Constellation, over 800 megawatts of continuous power. And in response to that, Constellation will be bringing back on a 3 Mile Island unit number 1. 2 years ago, if you had told me, John, 3 Mile Island is coming back, I would have said, you're crazy. But the world has changed so dramatically just the last 2 or 3 years with power consumption, where that power demand is coming from, and the increasing desire to have that carbon free. So all of those are drivers toward increasing our dependence and reliance on nuclear power. So here in the US, we've got reactors that are staying on that were slated to be turned off. We've got reactors that were turned off that are being brought back on, like Palisades, 3 Mile Island. We're seeing power uprates, we're seeing life extensions, and we're seeing a strong move toward a new technology, small modular reactors. And I shouldn't say it's new. The technology actually has been around for a long time, but it's being revived and moved into the commercial world. So by the year 2050, the projection is we'll have 300 small modular reactors here in the United States. Why? It's carbon free and base load power, and that's what the customers demand. So yeah, it's a change in the dynamic on electric supply for sure.
Love it. And what are your thoughts on SMRs, the small nuclear modulars, the smaller power stations that
Yeah.
are more, yeah.
Yeah. So quarterly, we sit down and meet with most of the U.S. utilities. Most recently, had a chance to sit down. There's a major conference in London that we all just got back from not too long ago. But that was one of the topics of conversation. And going into that conference, I thought, yeah, SMRs, small modulars, they're coming, but we're probably 5, 10 years out. I was corrected. We had a number of utilities tell us no. Small modular reactors are coming, and they're coming much faster than that. The fuel demand for those, we're looking at 2, maybe 3 years out before they start buying fuel. So they're on their way at a very rapid pace. I do think that there are some regulatory challenges that we face. There is a very stringent licensing process through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And so that's going to present some challenges to the utilities that are trying to bring these to bear. And I would also say that engineering is a challenge, not in the sense that these are difficult to engineer because the technology is really already there, but I think the engineers are going to have to restrain themselves. When you compare the engineering, the time and the money that you put into that, and then the licensing following that, I think it's going to behoove the industry to pick 3, 4, 5 designs, stick with it, get those licensed, get them into production, and stick with it for a while. Don't be changing designs every year and then having to go back to the regulators for approval, because that will really draw out the time requirements to put these facilities into production. So I think the engineers and the companies are going to have some discipline there. Pick a design, pick that horse and stay on that horse, ride it to the finish line. Don't be changing. And if you know engineers, if there's one thing they love to do, it's tinker, and they're going to have to be restrained, and let's stick with the design and run with it. But their SMRs are coming, great technology, a number of great designs. And I think we're going to see just an amazing growth in that over the next 5 to 10 years.
I love it. And then they also use uranium to enrich it and all that fun stuff. Just double
They
check.
do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they do.
So next question for you, John, with respect to risk management, how do you handle risk, and what are some mistakes you see people make with respect to risk management?
Number one on risk management, I've always said this, you have to have an experienced team. Teams members that have been there before, they've seen these challenges, they've seen these problems, they've seen how they've been dealt with, they've dealt with them personally. And once you have that team in place, the world can throw a lot of things at you, but you should be able to respond very well by leaning on the experience of your team. So once you have that team, you have to have a plan A, you have to have a plan B, and you have to have a plan C for pretty much every scenario. One of the things that CEOs do, not just me, but I have a lot of CEO friends. We spend a lot of time just contemplating what can happen and how do I prepare the company for that eventuality. And so I've got those plans of those different ways to respond in place. So yeah, the companies that fail are typically the companies that don't anticipate those risks properly and have contingencies put into place to address them. They don't have the experienced team to be able to think on their feet and respond appropriately. So that's one of the very top priorities of the executive management of any team is understanding that risk and being prepared to address it.
I love it. And how about timeless lessons? What are some timeless lessons that you've learned that you'd like to share with the audience, please?
So many. Um, One thing that's really been ringing true with our company over the last few years is creativity. You really want to always be able to think outside the box. Don't be constrained by just what has happened in the past and just what your experience is. Always be willing to learn and think a little bit differently than everyone else. If you're thinking like everyone else, you're going to get the same result as everyone else. And that may not be bad, but if you want truly great results, you have to think differently than other people. And so my team, my goodness, they just think creatively outside the box. I'm always amazed when we face a challenge. My executives will come to me and say, John, we could do this, this, and this. That's what's been done in the past. But how about X, Y, and Z? That's never been done. Let's contemplate that. And given my team's many, many years of experience, we're able to assess X, Y, and Z and deploy an appropriate response. So, no, I think one of the things that's really rang true lately is just creativity. And I think that's really important for any executive team and CEO is don't think inside the box always. Sometimes you got to step out of that box and bring a new solution to the table.
I love that. And then how about timeless mistakes, either you've made or you've seen other people make, and how do you avoid them?
Yeah, don't operate out of fear. Be bold. That's something that's true in my personal life and something I see that's something that people are always concerned about, especially younger people typically operate out of fear. Uh, we need to get away from that, be bold. That's not saying we don't assess the risk and make wise decisions, but be willing to take that risk, be willing to take that bold action once you are well informed and you have good advice from your team. But yeah, so many companies, they operate out of fear and let's just stay huddled in here and not make big, important decisions and bold decisions. When you do that, the company becomes stagnant. And that's an easy trap to fall into. And it's one that I personally fall into as well. And so, if there are any young CEOs out there, young executives, people moving up into those management ranks, be bold, be well informed, but make aggressive, well informed decisions.
I love it. Yeah, I've also fallen into that trap many times myself. So I absolutely love it. All right, let's talk about leadership. What makes a great leader, and what are some leadership qualities or anything along those lines that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah. When you build a great team, it's easy to be a leader, but you need to be able to rely on that team, listen to them, take their advice. They are experts in their respective fields. So, yeah, number one on leadership, you've got to have a good team. You can't do it all yourself. So rely on them. And then the old cliche, you've got to be able to work hard. If you can't work hard, then really you shouldn't be in that leadership role as well. So just working closely with that team, being well informed, listen. Um, I think those are some of the objectives of being a strong leader. There are a million other things that are required to be a good leader, but I think that's one of the things that's really missed out is having that good team and listening to them.
I love it. And then let's talk about adversity. How do you handle adversity? I know great leaders overcome adversity. They frame it differently. I actually had somebody on the show say one time, if you learn from the mistake, is it actually a mistake? I thought that was brilliant. So, what are some lessons that you've learned, or how do you handle adversity, obstacles that you've overcome, anything that you want to share in that department, please?
Yeah. So when you move into an executive role or a CEO's position, C-suite, that door behind me, no one has ever walked in and said, John, I just wanted to tell you everything is running perfectly today. There are no problems. Take it easy. In fact, why don't you just go take a round of golf today and no worries. No one ever does that. So when you talk about adversity, when you go into those roles, that's what you do. You handle adversity, you handle challenges to varying degrees. Some of them are very small and easily addressed, others are more significant. But when you go into those roles, you have to be prepared for that mentally, that it is always going to be a challenge. That's why you've been elevated to that position, is because you have the experience, the knowledge, the disposition to be able to handle those challenges. So, yeah, anyone filling those roles, you got to be able to manage that. It's a roller coaster emotionally. You got to be able to handle that, rely on that team to handle adversity, have those plans in place, have a lot of forethought. A CEO hopefully never gets sideswiped by a challenge. Hopefully, a good CEO has always seen the possibility of that challenge out there and is ready to address it. So hopefully that's instructive and helpful to people moving into those executive roles.
Oh, no, absolutely. So, final question for you, John. What would be the best piece of advice you'd like to give the audience or your 30-year-old self?
I'm going to go back to the one we talked about. Be bold, be fearless. That doesn't mean foolish. That doesn't mean knee-jerk reactions. It means be well informed, have a great team surrounding you. But once you have that in place and you're working hard and you know your industry, you know your projects, you know your people and those capabilities, make some of those bold decisions. And so, yeah, any person growing up, I would encourage them to do that. Um, my kids, I would encourage them, be bold. Don't be afraid to make those tough decisions in life.
I love it. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the show. I absolutely love what you're doing. Thank you for doing it and keeping our power going because we definitely, the energy grid's a super important thing that most people take for granted and overlook. And what's the best way for investors to learn more, people to learn more about UR Energy?
Sure, they can go to our website at ur-energy.com. If they want to know more about the broad industry, the World Nuclear Association also has a wonderful website with more information than anybody would ever want to know. There are also some great trade publications out there like Trade Tech and UX Weekly. So would encourage the readers, if they want to invest in the space, take a look at our company webpage, take a look at those publications as well.
Beautiful. Well, John, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Really good. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate the time.